Over the last year, I have reviewed all the GTA DLCs, and I decided to make a supercut containing all my DLC reviews. First up is Liberty City Stories. In 2005, Rockstar released the very first portable Grand Theft Auto. The game is set in 1998 and acts as a prequel to GTA 3. It follows Tony Cipriani, a character we first met in Grand Theft Auto 3, but slimmer. And this game would be known as Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories. Liberty City Stories would be Rockstar's first attempt at making a GTA game for the PSP, and well, I think they did a pretty good job. This game was groundbreaking to me, an entire GTA game that I can play anywhere, and a lot of people must have thought the same, as the game was incredibly successful. It ended up being the most sold PSP game of all time, with over 8 million copies sold worldwide. And it was even nominated for the Handheld Game of the Year award, but it lost to Nintendogs, which is fair enough, the game was pretty good.
Oh, well, that's alright then!
I loved this game. Despite the hardware limitations, Liberty City Stories really captures the feel of Liberty City, and it felt like a true GTA game. This game had everything from the cheat codes to the Easter eggs and the main protagonist with mommy issues. Liberty City Stories was one of the first games I owned in the PSP, and much like Vice City Stories, it ruined other PSP games for me. You see, these games felt so massive and detailed that your standard linear game just felt cheap. On top of that, the fact that I didn't need my PS2 to play a GTA game made my life so easy. My parents were separated and the PSP was incredibly easy to bring between houses. I didn't have to pack any consoles or games into a big box. Instead, I could just throw this in my backpack and not have to worry about setting anything up. So the fact that I had a portable Grand Theft Auto meant that I played these games much more than any other game. However, I was never too keen on the Liberty City Stories story, but like most GTAs, I mainly loved like the sandbox, open world and the cheat codes. I remember my friend writing an entire A4 page of cheat codes for me because I didn't have an internet connection. I would then just run around in a Rhino, make people's heads bigger, or obey traffic lights. I got hours of entertainment out of this game. So I always wondered, would this game hold up today? Our story follows Tony Cipriani, a character we met in GTA 3. Tony has just returned home to Liberty City, where he originally left to hide after killing a made man for his boss Salvatore Leone. Once back in town, Salvatore assigns him to climb the ranks back up to a made man, and Tony is pretty pissed because after all he's done, he has to start from the bottom and work his way back up.
Mr. Leone, I thought we got history. I mean, I've done a lot for this family. And now you're expecting me to take orders from this... Well, it just doesn't seem right.
But the only other person who's more upset about this is Tony's mother. She is completely embarrassed that her son is no longer a made man, to the point where she calls a hit on him.
I called a hit on you. It's really the only way, for you.
What? Ma?
You were always a disobedient fool. It's for the best, son. At least try to die like a real man.
Yikes, what is it with GTA characters and their mums? But Tony agrees to Salvatore's request and begins completing work for the Leone family. And eventually, Tony builds Salvatore's trust, and Salvatore starts to assign work directly to Tony. Tony eventually helps make the Leone family the most powerful in the city by bribing officials, sabotaging rival gangs, and kink shaming.
Okay, ladies, it's milk time. Who's gonna be mama?
Oh my.
Ah, come on, girls, get with the program.
But jokes aside, this story is alright. It was one that I never really paid too much attention to back in the day. Outside of the over-the-top characters like Tony's mum, even after replaying it recently, I didn't feel too attached to any of the characters or really feel like much was at stake. Like when you compare this game to Vice City Stories and Vic's relationship with Mary or his brother Lance.
You came for me. No one ever really did much for me before. That's sweet of you.
Hey, come on, let's get you to a hospital.
I don't think there's much point in that.
Come on, Louise.
We could have had something special.
Yeah. We did have something special.
Make sure Mary Jo takes care of my baby.
Damn. I just feel like Liberty City Stories doesn't do much outside of the world building, which is fine. I don't think the story was that bad. It was alright, and it serves as a good opener to GTA 3. This game has a lot of good. It's a GTA title and world crammed into a 2005 handheld device. This alone shows how competent and amazing Rockstar is as a development company. The soundtrack of this game is iconic and arguably one of my more favourites from the GTA series. On top of that, it had 10 radio stations with a variety of music such as Get Me a Dog, Sing It Back, and Overture by Mozart. And of course it has the hilarious talk show station with exaggerated humour.
This is Chatterbox, hello. Please be a normal human being.
Asshole, your show sucks.
Dude, you're gonna get no argument from me. Today's show is rubbish. What do you want to talk about?
How come I can't eat people?
Okay.
I personally always really enjoy these talk shows, as it takes like modern day shows or concepts and heavily exaggerates them for comedy. The world itself is full of Easter eggs and GTA humour. It's a full-scale portable GTA world that you can explore, use cheats, go on rampages, or follow traffic rules. But despite all this good, I did have a few issues with it. There are only a few things that I didn't really like about it. The main one being that this game really shows its age.
I'm 39, she's 20, so he came at me like, calling me a creep or whatever, and he was like saying that I had like a little dick at work and shit, and he got in trouble with YouTube.
Damn.
She was on the fence.
See, what do you think about that?
Its mission design is pretty formulaic and gets boring after the first 4 or 5 missions. Go here, shoot this, go home. Pair this with the fact that I wasn't overly invested in the story. I actually really struggled to finish this game. On top of all of that, the frame rate is incredibly unstable. I played both a PSP version and a PlayStation 2 version, and it always felt like I was playing at like 15 FPS. There was a constant slowdown where things loaded in, and at one point on the PSP I actually started to feel sick while playing it. But I understand that this was Rockstar's first attempt at pushing the boundaries of the PSP, and to be fair, it was a pretty decent first attempt, and my favourite part about it is that this first attempt allowed Rockstar to better develop a Vice City Stories, which I do think is a better game.
Alright, baby, this is the Lance Vance Dance!
I didn't hate this game. In fact, I actually enjoyed playing it. Well, yeah, it does show its age, and it does only feel like an expansion of GTA 3. I would recommend playing it if you had a copy of it at hand. In 2005, the PSP was released. Rockstar wanted to compete in the portable games market, so they released Liberty City Stories for the PSP. Despite being well received, the game would end up being kinda buggy, and it struggled to maintain a good frame rate. But after 1 year, Rockstar would better understand the PSP and the game engine, which would result in the creation of the forgotten GTA. Set in Miami, Vice City Stories is the prequel to Vice City. The game follows Victor Vance, Lance Vance's brother from Grand Theft Auto Vice City, released 4 years prior. In GTA Vice City, we actually see Vic get gunned down at the beginning of the game. The PSP game was released to a positive reception and has a score of 86 on Metacritic. Rockstar would then port the PSP version to the PlayStation 2, but it was criticised because it used a lot of the original code from the PSP, and they didn't really fix any of the known bugs. But Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories will forever be one of my favourite Grand Theft Autos. I had it on the PSP, which meant I could play it on long drives, easily take it between my parents' house, and hide it under my pillow so I could play until 2 in the morning. While it being portable was a huge reason I loved it, another thing I loved about the game was the story. The story begins when Vic lands in Vice City and enrolls in the military. He does this to raise money for his sick brother Pete. However, as soon as Vic enters the base, he meets his supervisor, Sergeant Jerry Martinez. Martinez ends up being incredibly corrupt and asks Vic to help him on a drug deal. After a lot of convincing, Vic finally agrees to help him. However, after the deal goes wrong, Martinez frames Vic for hiding drugs under his bed and bringing a prostitute into the base, resulting in Vic being discharged from the military. After having his entire career ruined, Vic ends up working for Phil Cassidy, who he met during his work for Martinez. And actually, Martinez then hires Phil and Vic later on to do more work for him, only for him to betray them. Again, Vic also finds work from Phil's brother-in-law, Marty J. Williams, who is the leader of a street gang called the Trailer Park Mafia. Marty also abuses his wife Louise, who actually ends up becoming a love interest for Vic. This pisses Marty off, so he attempts to kidnap her, which forces Vic to kill him and save Louise. With Marty dead, Vic takes over his gang. He renames it to the Vance crime family. Shortly after, his brother Lance Vance then arrives in Vice City and eventually helps Vic with the Vance crime family takeover. The pair end up stealing a huge drug shipment from Martinez, which results in Vic and Lance being kidnapped by Armando and Diego, aka the Mendez brothers. It turns out the drugs that they stole actually belong to the Mendez brothers, who are the drug kingpins of Vice City. So Vic and Lance end up being forced to work for them to make up for their mistake. They begin working with the Mendez brothers, who introduce them to Rennie. Rennie then introduces Vic to Barry, the talent manager for Phil Collins. Vic is then tasked with protecting Phil from the mafia hitmen, all because Barry owes them money. Later on, Rennie introduces Vic to Ricardo Diaz, who wants to take over the Mendez brothers' operations. However, this causes the Mendez brothers to grow distrustful of Vic and Lance and eventually make an attempt on their lives. Eventually, the Mendez brothers kidnap Louise and Lance, leading to Vic storming their mansion and killing Armando. But he fails to rescue Louise, who then dies in his arms. Desperate for revenge, with the help from Phil Cassidy and Ricardo Diaz, Vic manages to steal the army chopper from Fort Baxter. Using this chopper, Vic goes to Martinez and Diego's hideout and then kills the both of them. Lance then shows up to help, after everyone is dead. Good to see he's still useless in this game as well.
This is the Lance Vance Day.
Lance tries to convince Vic to help with a drug deal coming up, but Vic is no longer interested, and instead he just wants to send Pete money for his medication. But eventually, Vic returns to Vice City and is killed in a drug deal gone wrong, starting the events of Grand Theft Auto Vice City. I always loved Victor Vance as a protagonist. From the beginning, Vic only really wanted to help his brother. He wasn't a mercenary, a gangster, a criminal mastermind, or a psycho. In the beginning, he was just a regular guy who got caught up in some bad shit and couldn't see a way out. Throughout the story, I always felt like I was rooting for him, whether it was his relationship with Louise, him struggling to meet ends meet, or getting revenge on the people who wronged him. I felt the story was really well crafted, excluding some of the corny lines and rushed plot points. But with all the waggy characters paired with the over-the-top rags to riches story makes it incredibly entertaining to this day. And what better place for this criminal empire story to take place other than the fictional version of Miami? The violence, women, sports car, vibrant colours and the 80s theme really give this story a dopamine-fueled setting. Every outfit, car, radio station made this game so memorable to this day. Overall, the gameplay is not terrible, even with today's standards. Yes, it is flawed, but it's still completely playable in 2022. And what makes Vice City Stories more impressive is that it was a PSP game made in 2006. That's insane. Not only do you have a fully fleshed out sandbox capable of walking, driving, and combat, you had a 15-hour long story with celebrity casting, all in a fucking PSP game. So my question is, why isn't this game talked about more? Why was it forgotten? I think it's because of two main reasons. It was overshadowed by Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. San Andreas was released 2 years prior, but it was ahead of its time. It has better graphics, smoother gameplay, better side missions, and much, much more. Playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories after playing San Andreas feels like a step back in time, which is understandable because Vice City Stories was built on a much, much weaker console, and you can't really expect it to compete with the technology-pushing Goliath that was San Andreas. The other reason it was forgotten was that the game was a PlayStation exclusive, and it was originally a PSP exclusive, and it only became available on the PlayStation 2 a year later in 2007, meaning if you wanted to play this game, you either had to own a PlayStation 2 or a PSP. And don't forget, the PlayStation 3 had already released in 2006, and it wasn't ported to the PS2 until 2007, further shrinking the amount of people who probably played it. But despite Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories being the forgotten GTA, it is still a fun game full of personality and lore. Now, it may not have had Bigfoot roaming around it like San Andreas did, but there were a lot of cool Easter eggs. I have owned GTA 4 episodes from Liberty City for 15 years, but yet I never played The Lost and the Damned. What? So let's review it in 2024. You know, it is a surprise that I never played this DLC, especially because I played the Ballad Tony so much and I absolutely adored GTA 4, but I was never really sold on The Lost and the Damned, and to be honest, I think it was the motorcycles. I've always hated riding motorcycles in GTA games, as it literally takes one tap to send you flying off. Let's take a look at the good, the bad, and the great to find out why I never played this game, and if I really missed anything. I have to admit, there is a lot of good about this game. It feels like a GTA game, but a little bit different. I really like the biker/rocker theme. Everything is grungy and dirty, like the minimap and UI. The Lost in the Dam introduced a few new game mechanics, like when you ride in formation with your gang, it will grant you armor and health. You can even ring the gang for backup or to set up ambushes, which was really cool. There's also a gun van mechanic where your buddies will deliver a van full of guns to you. But I really didn't utilize any of these mechanics until the final missions, and it resulted in me missing feeling so many times. The Lost in the Dam sees the main protagonist Johnny struggling to keep his motorcycle gang together when the president Billy is released from prison. Billy is reckless and seems to get the gang into unnecessary trouble. These wild actions instills doubt into Johnny and some other members of the club, which all results in Billy getting arrested again, then the club splitting in half following Johnny and the other half following Brian. But in the end, over half the club is wiped out by Johnny and his members, and they eventually break into prison to kill Billy. Overall, this story is alright. It feels a bit rushed, and some of the conflict felt disingenuous due to the pacing. Like, killing Billy in prison seemed to come out of nowhere, but we'll get into this later. The story is really good at expanding on GTA 4 and gives us different perspectives of the main cast and story. Like, for example, Nico from Johnny's perspective is a Terminator.
You don't want to get in that slob's way.
It really puts into perspective at how dangerous Nico actually was. We even get to see Roman's kidnapping, as we are the ones to do it.
Damn it! Dude done pissed himself.
Even the characters were actually pretty good. Billy, for example, lived up to that selfish asshole character, and I hated him straight away. Brian is a flat-out weasel who drives me insane, and Ashley is a really interesting character due to her relationship with Johnny. Like I said before, I hate the bikes. It's probably the reason I never wanted to play this DLC, and to be honest, this playthrough didn't change that. Hell, I pretty much only use taxis outside of missions in this game. I don't know what it is with riding a motorbike in GTA, but I just never liked doing it. But in the Lost in the Dam, they clearly reduced your chance of flying off your bike and made the bikes a lot more stable, as there were so many times that I should have died in a crash but somehow managed to stay on the bike. Now yeah, don't get me wrong, the whole motorbike thing is a personal preference kind of complaint, so I won't hold it against the game. The only real complaints I have is to do with the mission and story. Now the missions are fairly straightforward. Ride in formation, now race your fellow gang members to the place, shoot people, and ride home. And to be honest, these missions got boring so quickly. The mission designs feels kinda rushed and copy-paste, even for GTA standards, and to be honest, this kind of explains the story. To me, I just wasn't overly invested in Johnny's story. Everything felt half-baked, like the drama with Billy escalates far too quickly. 1 minute he's free from jail, him and Johnny kind of shout at each other a bit, and then the next minute you're breaking into jail to murder him. The best part of the story for me was Johnny's struggle with loving Ashley. No matter how much he helps, he knows that her addiction will always win, and so he has to let her go. But he can't. I really wish they would have expanded in this storyline even more, as it was far more interesting to me than Billy's storyline. And on top of that, it would have made Johnny's death in GTA 5 even more sad. But I kind of assumed the devs had to get this DLC out the door quickly, and maybe didn't have a lot of time for longer stories or more diverse missions. Like I said, the Ashley storyline is my favourite part of this game, and I really wish it was explored more. I also liked how it wasn't really a happy ending. The game ends and you're like, oh wow, okay, we just killed our president, murdered half our gang, and now we have nothing left. Nice. On top of that, the entire game feels kind of different to a lot of GTA games. Between the aesthetic choices, gameplay mechanics, and story about heroin addicted bikers, this feels kind of different to a standard GTA game, and I like that. Overall, I did enjoy this game. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't terrible, and if you own a copy of it, I would recommend playing it if you've never have before. And it is kind of a shame that I never played this back in like 2010, all because I didn't like motorbikes in GTA games.
Afternoon naps, Mirror's Edge, David Tennant are all underrated. These are things we look at and think, why is nobody talking about this? This is how I feel about Grand Theft Auto: The Ballad of Gay Tony. Released in 2009, the Ballad of Gay Tony follows Luis Lopez throughout the streets of Liberty City. This game is a part of the DLC collection, Episodes from Liberty City. You know, back when DLCs weren't completely shitty. This collection was meant to add and expand to the story of GTA 4, with 2 additional storylines that all tie together to make Liberty City feel like it was really lived in. And I think they really hit the nail on the head. Here's how. The story begins with the robbery of the Bank of Liberty. This is a mission we got to play in GTA 4. Here we are introduced to Luis Lopez. Luis works for Anthony Prince, aka Gay Tony. Tony is struggling to run his nightclubs, Massonet 9 and Hercules, so he decides to borrow some money from the Ancelot crime family and Maury Kibbutz. Tony basically borrowed money from loan sharks to keep his clubs up and running, but as you could imagine, this was a dumb idea. Because of Tony's dumb decision, Luis ends up having to work for these guys just to help repay Tony's debts. Whilst working for the loan sharks, Luis meets Yusuf Amir, a real estate developer interested in buying Tony's clubs. He helps Yusuf with a few basic tasks like stealing a helicopter, blowing up a yacht, and stealing a literal tank from the government.
What?
After jumping through hoops for the insufferable Maury, Luis ends up eventually settling Tony's debts, leaving him only indebted to the Ancelot crime family. Tony then comes up with the great idea of buying smuggled diamonds for $2 million and then selling them at a higher price. However, the deal is ambushed by the Lost Biker gang, resulting in the diamonds being stolen. Tony eventually finds out that the diamonds are going to be exchanged at the Liberton, so he sends Luis to get them back. Here Luis ambushes Nico, Johnny and the Jewish mob to take back the diamonds. In the meantime, Luis also begins working for the Russian crime lord Ray Bulgarian. Ray offers to clear Tony's debt, so Luis does a few hit jobs for him, but Ray eventually turns on him when it is revealed that the diamonds originally belonged to Ray. But then Giovanni Ancelotti orders Luis to give the diamonds to Nico as a ransom for his daughter. Tony and Luis eventually give in and decide to give Nico the diamonds in exchange for Ray's daughter, but the deal is then intercepted by Ray's men and it eventually leads to the diamonds being lost. Later on, Luis meets one of Ray's men. He tells Luis to kill Tony and in return Ray will spare his life, but Luis refuses and ends up having to defend Massonet 9 against Ray's men. Luis eventually decides to destroy Ray's drug operation, only to find out Ray is trying to skip town. So with the help from Yusuf, Luis rushes to the airport, boards Ray's plane and kills him, completely freeing himself and Tony from debt. Yusuf offers to buy Tony's nightclubs, but he declines as he would rather keep the clubs as a family business for now. Before we get into the good, there are a few issues. The game on PC is incredibly buggy. Between the laggy cutscenes, crashes and infinite loading screens, I was going mad. But I think this is a common problem with the entirety of GTA 4 on PC, and not just the DLCs. When the game was released on PC, it was notorious for being unplayable across most PCs. It's just a bad port, and it was never fixed for some reason, which is an absolute shame because GTA 4, Lost in the Dam, The Ballad of Gay Tony are all incredibly fun games to play. But hey, don't worry, as I'm sure we'll get GTA 4 the Definitive Edition released very soon, which definitely won't suck. Despite the poor PC port, this game is not talked about enough. It took GTA 4, an incredibly fun sandbox, and added more content to it, from the new base jump mechanic, to music, to sticky bombs, the explosive AA-12 gun, and much more. I particularly loved the AA-12, as it was just overpowered. From one-tapping enemies to three-tapping helicopters, it made my playthrough hilarious, easy, and fun. On top of the new content, the Ballad of Gay Tony brought a new perspective of Liberty City. In GTA 4, everything was dull and dreary, and the Lost and the Damned, everything was like kinda grey, and in the Ballad of Gay Tony, the colours were a lot more vibrant. Pair this vibrant colour scheme with the soundtrack and the new music, it really gives a new perspective of Liberty City, which fits in really well with the themes of this story and the new cast of characters. But despite the story being short and not majorly impressive, I feel like it fits in incredibly well as a DLC. GTA 4 had an incredible story about revenge, and built an incredible city with an incredible cast of characters. The Ballad of Gay Tony fills in the details from plot points from the original game, and expands on the characters from the city, as well as adding in some more. And it did it amazingly. Throughout the story, we see missions and characters from GTA 4, but from Luis's perspective. This additional perspective can really alter how we think about certain situations. A prime example of this is Brucey Kibbutz. In GTA 4, we meet him as Nico. He is an incredibly unlikable character who is only concerned with sex, drugs, guns, cars, and his muscles. But he does seem to be kind of insecure. But then we meet Brucey again as Louise, through his brother Maury. Maury bullies Brucey a lot and is constantly making fun of him and making him the butt of all his jokes. This perspective of Brucey that we didn't see in GTA 4 makes the player second guess their opinion of him. Yes, he's still a piece of shit, but you do feel a bit of sympathy for him, as you can now understand why he is the way he is. The Ballad of Gay Tony improved on the content of its base game. It built upon its story, world and characters. This is why I think The Ballad of Gay Tony is an incredible DLC. In an age where DLCs are usually just overpriced cosmetics that don't add any substance or any value to their games, taking a step back and playing this DLC really blew my mind. For $20 you got around 17 plus hours of content, 2 fleshed out storylines with their own cast of characters that all added to and expanded on its base game. Here is a skin in Valorant I just spent $20 on. This is why Grand Theft Auto The Ballad of Gay Tony is underrated.